Hey, what's up? My name is Atsui Inu. My friends call me Jojo, and this is your guide to not being intimidated by Path of Exile 2. This is made specifically for people who either have not yet played Path of Exile 1, or maybe you tried it out and it overwhelmed you and you quit like many do. But basically, I am going to try to show you why you don't need to be intimidated by PoE 2, and I'll try to explain things in a way that even a child could understand. I'm only going to be using information that is public info from Grinding Gear Games, GGG, the creators of the game. So no spoilers or leaks, just stuff that the company themselves have put out or have said in interviews. So with that, let's talk about me. I don't really care what you call me. You can call me Atsuinu. You can call me Jojo. You can call me whatever you want. I don't care. I've clocked in 1,500 or more hours in Path of Exile 1. And to somebody who doesn't play Path of Exile, I might sound insane. I might sound like a veteran. But to a PoE player, these sound like rookie numbers. I still remember how overwhelmed I was by the amount of information I got when I just started. I totally get it, I can relate, and I hope to make this easier for new players. In the two following leagues when I first started, I pushed for every single achievement, and I got them. I've experienced a lot of what PoE 1 has to offer. I've played a ton of different builds, even created my own. Here's some of the builds that I've played. This probably means nothing to you if you're the target audience of this video, but the short of it is that I experimented, and I experimented a lot. That doesn't make me an expert, but it does mean that I've seen a lot of different perspectives and tried a few different things, and hopefully I can speak to that a little bit. Before we get into the content, I just want to say I don't care if you listen to me. I'm making this for my friends, so if you, if you want to be head-ass about it, like, fuck off, I don't care. Cool. Here's what I'm going to talk about today. Characters, including things like classes, ascendancies, attributes, passive tree, and passive points. We've got skills, which includes the gem system, skill gems, and support gems. Items, talking about explicit and implicit modifiers, crafting and currency, and unique items. And then we'll talk a little bit about stats, defense, and offense, and then go through some FAQs. So, characters. Characters, when you select a character, you choose a class. And not all of the classes are available at launch, but each class correlates with an attribute, which is something we'll talk about later, and have a different starting point on the passive tree, which is also something that we'll talk about later. But I wanted to include this because it gives you an idea of what's available in the game, as well as like where they start directionally on the tree. This is lined up to where the tree goes, at least our best estimates of that information right now without spoilers. And then on top of that, it'll tell you what their primary attributes are. So easiest for a warrior to get to strength nodes, for example. Okay, ascendancies. Ascendancies are a term that you're going to hear thrown around a lot. These are actually just became available today on the Grinding Gear Games website on, I believe it's the forum. They released a post with every single ascendancy that's available in early access. And these are basically mid-game character specializations. So you're getting through the story. You might take a step while you're in the first few acts, and then maybe in the later acts you take another few steps. And by acts, I mean basically the chapters of the story. And so these are basically things that you're going to kind of have to make a decision on decently early. So it's worth thinking about early, understanding what these are. These are basically specializations that change the way that you play. And they'll require some kind of trial for you to quote unquote ascend and get points for these. And so you can see some trees over here. You put some points on it, and those are the things that you allocate. You can see that they've got little branches and stuff. And so to get to this node far in here, you'd have to grab this one first, and grab this one first, and then also grab this one first in this order, 1, 2, 3, 4, in order to grab this node. So you can grab up to 8 points by end game, but you probably will get 2 at a time if things are the same as Path of Exile 1. Each class that we talked about earlier here has 2 options for ascendancies. And so you can see 2 examples of ascendancies you can choose from over here. As of an interview on December 2nd, you cannot change your Ascendancy once you select it, which is why I think it's worth, especially for a new player, taking a look and doing your research into which one you want to pick. This might change later, we'll see. But these are really like game-changing and build-defining choices. So it would be great for you to archetype like what kind of character do I want to play early on before you kind of get zoned in and you have to like, start the game over or something. Okay, here's the Ascendancies. So each Ascendancy is tied to a class that you'll see here. I've given you a little bit of a brief description of what it is. This came, like I put this information in here before the additional information came out on the post today. So it's not fully up to date, but I think like I'm just basically writing like concept, like what the heck is this in general? Like a Titan, which is a warrior class. Ascendancy is a beefy boy, loves slamming and stunning enemies. So if you want to come on and slam, you pick Titan. Warbringer, they like totems and screaming at enemies. They're also probably fairly beefy. Warriors in general, strength type characters tend to be the tankier ones in the game, at least historically. We'll see about Path of Exile 2, especially when it comes to how difficult melee might be comparatively to playing a ranged character in terms of dodging enemy attacks, bosses, damage, and things like that. So more to come on that in the future, but generally it'd have the highest like base health, for example. Mercenary, they have Witch Hunter and Gemling Legionnaire. Witch Hunters are, people are really hyped about their explodies. And they've got a few nodes that like quickly chunk enemies, whether they're high or low in health. So that's something to think about. They also have Gemling Legionnaires, which makes your gems more awesome. To me, this sounds like it might be a good vanilla experience in the sense that like you'll be able to try the game as it is without these sort of build defining things with empowered skills. And we'll talk more about gems later. Monks got Invoker, which adds elemental buffs to attacks, and the Acolyte of Chayula, which is a chaos damage type and leech, which means it recovers by dealing damage. We'll talk a little more about damage types later, not going too in depth into this, but just know that like if you want to do like chaos damage and probably a melee if you're a monk, then this is going to be the class for you. I have heard Monk from Jonathan Rogers in an interview that he did online that he said monks tend to be the most fun and rewarding class to play, but also the squishiest, meaning that they die the most easily. So this might not be a great choice for your first character, especially if you're new to Path of Exile. Sorceress has gotten Stormweaver and Chronomancer. So Stormweaver is an elemental mage, just like what it sounds like, lightning and ice mage. So any, MapleStory fans out there or something, ice lightning is your jam, then you're going to want to pick Stormweaver. Chronomancer stops time. Straightforward, easy. That's kind of their deal. They've got time-related things, so could be really cool. Ranger has Deadeye and Pathfinder. Deadeye is a super long-ranged archer, whereas Pathfinder is more of like a potion flask type effect character. So depending on what you're looking for in your Ranger, you could choose one of those. Witch has Blood Mage and Infernalist. Blood Mage is exactly what it sounds like, a Blood Mage, which is like, has to deal with, maybe can spend life to cast powerful spells or steal life from enemies. To be honest, I haven't read into this one too much, but if you know what a Blood Mage is as an archetype outside of this game, this will seem very familiar to you. And then we've got Infernalist, which is like a Fire Mage with fire minions. So generally, this will give you a pretty good idea of what these are, but of course, I encourage you to do your own rating based off of what sparks your interest, and then look into that further to make your decision. Attributes. Attributes are strength, dexterity, and intelligence. These are required for equipment. We'll talk about that later, and we'll show you an example later. 5 of each attribute are required for each gem. And so these gems are colored, and these attributes are colored. So we talked about like warrior being strength. Strength is red. Red gems are red and require 5 strength to be used. So each each gem that you put in there, we'll talk about gems more later, but like will require 5 of its corresponding attribute. And stats also have bonuses inherently. We don't know the details, but I put some examples here from Path of Exile 1. So every 10 strength in PoE 1 gives you 5 max life and 2% increased melee physical damage. Dexterity gives you 20 accuracy rating, 2% increased evasion rating. 10 intelligence will give you 5 max mana and 2% increased maximum energy shield. You can get attributes through your equipment stats as well as through your passive tree, and we'll talk about this more later too. So your passive tree and your passive points. Honestly, this is probably the thing that scares people most about any Path of Exile game. It's the passive tree. It looks massive. It looks scary. I get it. Honestly, when you like sit down and just like take a breath, the passive tree is a lot less scary than it looks. You probably see a whole bunch of things going on, but you're getting 1 passive point per level. It's not like you're having to make your full build decision right away. You can re-specialize things when you have gold that you naturally will be picking up by killing enemies, and you can say, hey, I made a poor choice here. I want to remove these points from my tree and then add them somewhere else. You'll be able to do that. So don't feel locked in or like you broken and bricked your build or something. It's fine. This game is all about experimentation. But basically, you connect the dots. So you can kind of see these pathways here, and you do have to connect the dots with these lines, and that will enable you to get to stuff away from your starting point. So in this example here, this is the starting point. If you want to get here to this node here, you will have to path this way, but you can path this way and go up. It's going to take you more points, but it'll give you these nodes here, whatever these are. So there's a lot of ways to get to where you're going, and there's a lot of little fun late game things you can do to really like maximize your build. I know it's like one of those just overwhelming things, but all of the nodes, according to, I think it was Jonathan Rogers as well in an interview, close to wherever your class is starting are probably good for you. So don't feel too much pressure with your choice. You may want to explore around and see if there's any nodes that are going in the in the direction that like you want to specialize in. But like ultimately, the things that you want for your build are grouped together. And in general, I would say as a rule of thumb for a new player, focus on survivability on your tree. And we'll talk a little bit about defenses later, but spec into those. And just you can always gauge what you want to do as you go, right? You're like, hey, like my damage feels a little weak. Like you can spec more into damage. If you are feeling like you're dying more, you're having a hard time living, or you're getting chunked by bosses or things, you can make some adjustments there too. So it enables you to play the way that you want to play and be flexible. Okay, there's a lot of different types of nodes on this tree, and the screenshots from the stream are tiny, so I apologize that these images are really grainy, but hopefully this is helpful. There are different types of nodes on your tree. The first is attributes. We talked about attributes earlier. This is one of the places you can get them. There are little attribute nodes around that you can grab and get some attributes. There are bigger attribute nodes that you can grab, which will give more, but they are not as easy to get most of the time. So you can kind of choose where you want to go depending on if you need a ton more of attributes for your specific build and what you want to do, or you can get less and just get the bare minimum for what you need for your build, and that's valid as well. Clusters, there's clusters on your tree. These are themed nodes. So you can see these are a cluster. They probably all give the same stat. I don't honestly know what the stat would be. It seems like something magey or arcane. So maybe it's like arcane cloak or something. Who knows? But basically, like, this is a cluster, an example of a cluster of nodes. And I can go back here and you can see there's several different like clusters of nodes that kind of are thematically connected, and we'll have maybe another example later. And these are like generally like doing similar things, right? So like they'll have small nodes and a notable. You'll probably have to path to a certain place to get to the notable, and we'll talk about that later. And like, let's say one of them is bow damage. If they're all in that cluster, they're probably all related to bow damage. Okay, small nodes are generally like bonus stats. Like it could be like 2% chance to block attack, or 2%, 3% projectile speed, something like that. Maximum life or increased armor, things like that. Like these are small nodes that you can just kind of path through to get to your later destinations while still grabbing some nice bonuses for your build, depending on what you need. Notables, these are like these bigger gold border ones. So we talked about a notable example up here. And generally they give bigger advantages. So, your kind of goal is to get more notables in general that are related to your build. And that's probably going to be early game, the best way that you can kind of get some quick advantages. You've also got keystones. Keystones are like super big compared to the others. And generally they are gameplay defining trade-offs. So, I haven't done a ton of research into which keystones are going to be available in PoE 2, but I know that some of the famous ones from Path of Exile 1 are going to be included. And like these are things that in Path of Exile 1 people make their whole build around. So if you hear the term like chaos inoculation, mind over matter, things like that, these are like things that people like build around in their like character that really define their play style. So these you might want to be careful picking up early game, but it can be a thing that like gives you a lot of reward if you so choose. Jewel sockets. So I'm not going to talk much about jewels in this video. I think they're going to be something like endgame if they're anything like PoE 1. They might be like little stat boosts or things, but just know that they're like items that you can slap into your tree, and it'll give you some bonuses. Who knows what kind of stats are going to be on those this time around? But it could be like attack speed, or it could be like damage with axes, or block chance while holding a shield, or damage mods, or even life or resistance mods, and we'll talk about those later. But basically, you can get some extra mods by grabbing a jewel socket and slapping a jewel in there. All right, let's talk about skills. So we've got this whole gem system, and this system has been definitely simplified for PoE 2, but still is complex. You create gems by using uncut gems. Yeah, I assume you just cut them. Gems have levels. Those levels impact how powerful they are, and the level that your gem starts at, I believe, is going to be dependent on the level of the uncut gem they are created from, but you can level them up using more uncut skill gems. If PoE 2 works the same way as the first one, the soft cap for gem level is probably 20, but you can probably get some more through gear or your passive tree. And I know for a fact you can get gem levels through an Ascendancy, which is the Gemling Legionnaire. We talked about this earlier, but gems have a color. You can kind of see, you can probably guess by looking at these what color they are. Glacial Bolt is probably blue. Gas Grenade, this one's probably green. Explosive Shot is, I don't know, maybe red. Explosive Grenade is probably also red. I don't know, man. These are not terribly hard to guess, but I think when you're holding the gem itself, you can probably see it a little bit more clearly on your screen. They have a color, and that corresponds to the attribute you need +5 of to use the gem. There are 3 types of gems that I am currently aware of. So skill gems, support gems, and meta gems. Skill gems provide you with a skill. Very clear, obvious, and simple. We talked about like the level scales up the numbers for the skills. Higher level, better damage. Using skills generally takes some kind of resource, so like mana or spirit, and this can be increased or reduced, and your capacity to cast those can scale up. Skills have tags that tell you what kind of modifiers from your gear or passive tree will affect them. Not everything works together with everything. So like here's some examples from like area of effect, physical, lightning, aura. These are different tags that I think are going to be on PoE 2 gems. Some of the examples from PoE 1 can tell you a little bit about a skill. So like different attack tags. different buff tags or different debuff tags. In Path of Exile 2, it's been confirmed that dodge roll and base attack are considered skills. So you can see crossbow shot right here. That's a skill. You can do things with that. Okay, support gems. Basically, pretty self-explanatory. Support's a skill gem. These go into these little funny sockets right next to the skill gem. The tags will tell you if they work with your skill gem that you want it to go with. And so if you've got like one that has like aura, like a aura skill gem, and you have like no aura tag on the support gem, they probably won't work together. So that's I think that's just like the general rule of thumb is like take a look at the tags and see if that stuff works. If not, they probably don't work together. Support gems also have colors, they also have levels, and they you can only use one of each type of support gem in your entire skill build. So I don't have an example, but if I were to take a simple one from Path of Exile 1, like added fire damage. Like if you put added fire damage on this explosive shot, you can't also put one on the gas grenade. Like you can only have one in your whole build. There are exceptions to this, as shown again by Gentleman Legionnaire. Thank you to Gentleman Legionnaire for making this complicated. But essentially, like there's ways probably to circumvent this outside of that as well. But I think this is like just the baseline is you can just have one of each support gem. Maximum number of support gems can be seen in your skill panel. You can see the panel here. You can see the crossbow shot has 2 sockets. You can only have 2 support gems. If it has 3 sockets, you can have 3 support gems. I don't know how to upgrade that and give you more support sockets, so that's something that we're probably going to have to, well, there might be information out there, but I don't know it, and I'll probably figure it out as I go. But know that support gems are going to make your skill do better things. But sometimes if like that better thing is more damage or more effect, it'll probably have a cost multiplier as well. So we talked about like earlier skill gems, they take up a resource. It might mean that they take 150% mana, or something like that. So hope that helps. Let's move to meta gems. Honestly, we don't know a ton about meta gems yet. We just know that they are affected by other skill gems, or maybe they like trigger the skill gem, that they're part, like that they're linked to, or maybe that the skill gems trigger the meta gem. I don't really know, to be honest. We don't know a ton about these yet. We'll figure it out. All right, items. Items have explicit modifiers, and explicit modifiers basically grant different bonuses. So some examples of this would be like attributes, damage, defenses, even things like move speed, other utility stuff. Different gear types can roll different items. I talked about move speed for a reason. Move speed is one of those things you probably only see on boots, and not on like, I don't know, a helmet or something. And so it's, I don't know how easy it's going to be in Path of Exile 2 to know what can roll on what, but the community's going to figure it out and let you know later. But I think there's some like level of reasonability to it, weapons and gloves can probably roll attack speed, but like your boots probably can't. Your boots probably can roll movement speed, but your gloves probably can't, right? Like I think there's a little bit of like logic to it, but sometimes it can be a little messy. So, I think later on as you're trying to figure this stuff out, you can look it up when there's more information. Item level affects stat requirements, but also higher level item levels can generally get higher mods. So you can see the item level here. It's actually not on this image. It shows you the requirements right here. But if you press Alt on an item, you'll see a lot more information on it. So like in this example, which is a snip from the GGG Live, if they hit Alt, you would probably see the item level of this item. You would probably see a couple of other things we're going to talk about here. So just know like slapping Alt can sometimes be nice when you're looking at an item, and it'll tell you more about like what kind of things you can get from that item or what you can expect from that item. So if it's a like low level item, it means that like there's probably a lot of modifiers that you can't even get as you're crafting on this thing, and we'll talk about crafting later. But modifiers also have tiers, and that means like these mods like adds 3 to 7 fire damage. That sounds tiny, right? Like these numbers can get much higher later on. Adds 5 intelligence is like nothing. So clearly this is a low item level item. It's got low requirements. It's got low stats. That's not to say a high item level always gets higher stats, but it means that it can get higher stats. Like a low item level means that it can never get those stats. Currency items, we'll talk more about these later, but just know that currency items can add, remove, or change mods on items, and there might be special currency items from endgame mechanics that can add exclusive modifiers. We don't know yet. Implicit modifiers. Implicit modifiers, this thing at the top here, generally these come baked into items when you pick them up. So this is like a specific type of item that grants this in particular, this implicit. And you can still craft the bottom and or like add mods or remove mods from there. But the top is generally, for the most part, especially as a new player, going to stay the same. There are ranges though. So like every stat we talked about has a range, right? So if you hit Alt like I talked about, it will tell you what that range is. This might say 33 to 37, and maybe they middle rolled it to a 35. So there's probably going to be some kind of item that you can use to re-roll that. Same with the implicit, right? This might be 15 to 20% and they hit a 17%. This can be updated and re-rolled to hit that 20%, okay? Corrupting an item with a Val Orb can add or change the implicit, but it can also brick the item, which means to make the item trash and not usable. So it is not advised to do this for new players when you're crafting. There are maybe a few early uses for this, but I would say this is something that you shouldn't worry about for now. There's a lot we don't know yet about the implicits in Path of Exile 2. So, more to come on this. Crafting and currency. Crafting, currency is used as for trading with other players. We don't know which ones are going to be popular in Path of Exile 2. But these are your primary method of trading. Let's say there's an item you see up on the trade site. They will list this up for trade currency, and you can whisper them and buy it from them. It can also be used in the auction house to exchange for consumable items with gold. And you expend some of the gold, trade some of your currency for some kind of item. Currency can also always be used to upgrade your items in some kind of way, and those functions are different. It can add a new random modifier to your rare item, or maybe it can add a new modifier to your magic item. These are different things that you can do to your item to craft it up and make it a better item. And so that's kind of like the purpose of these currencies in the game is for crafting, to improve your items, but at the same time can be used to trade with players as well. There's a lot of changes to these currencies compared to how they worked in Path of Exile 1. So we'll learn more about these as we go, but just, early game, try to pick currency up, especially if you've never seen it before. Pick it up, use it, see what happens. Maybe hold on to it if you don't find a good use for it, and you might be able to use it as trade currency later. Who knows? I also just realized I don't have a section on this, but there are different rarities of items. There's normal, magic, and rare. And on the next slide, I talk about unique. But normal items, they have white text. Rare, what am I saying? Magic items have blue text. Rare items have golden text. And so unique items have this orangey color, golden colored text. And that'll tell you, generally speaking, it'll tell you how many mods are on the item. The item that you pick up is probably going to be what's called unidentified, which means we don't know what modifiers are on it, and you have to use a currency item to reveal that information. And so, a normal item is not going to have any mods. A magic item is going to have 1 to 2 mods, and then a rare item can have up to probably 6 mods if you don't count implicit, but up to 6 explicit mods. And then there's unique items. These are generally build defining items as well. Not all of them are. Some of them suck, but some of them are incredibly good. Sometimes they have special modifiers that cannot be crafted, including granting skills, like in the image on the right. Something they noted is that item level thing that we talked about earlier, which you can hit Alt to see, is going to determine the level, the skill scaling. So you're going to want a higher level, item level, unique item to get better skill there. And it's not always better to use a unique compared to a rare item. So sometimes it can be good, but sometimes it's not great. So just choose wisely. Don't just slap on any unique item you find. You got to read it and see if it actually goes well with your build, if it's actually an improvement from what you've got. And if so, don't be afraid to use it. In Path of Exile 1 Endgame, really well crafted up rares tended to be better than unique items. That's not universally true, because there are some unique items that really define that build and would be necessary for defensive survival or for damage or for just the way that the build works and functions. And so sometimes there's exceptions to that, but in general a good rare item is going to be better than a unique one. That said, there may be some unique items that you find that are really good for you while you're leveling up, and you might run that in part of the campaign and then say, hey, I've outgrown this. It's time to swap, and that's okay too. I want to note here that in my first experience with Path of Exile 1, I didn't realize that there were certain things that can be crafted. It never occurred to me that it could be crafted. And so I just want to mention, especially as we go into a new game here, that a lot of things in this game can be crafted if it's got modifiers on it, or even if it doesn't have modifiers on it, it might be craftable. So it's not always intuitive, and sometimes it could be worth playing around with that. Okay, stats. So this whole stats section is going to be a very, very quick overview. I don't want to go super in depth on stats. I think this is a huge, complex topic that you've really had to deep dive into. But I think this will give you the very basic understanding, which is defense, which I broke down personally into base defenses, mitigation, and prevention. So base defenses examples would be life and energy shield. You got more life, you take a bigger hit, right? Very simple, very straightforward. You've got mitigation. And mitigation would include things like resistances and armor, which reduce the amount of a type of damage that you take. So armor reduces the physical damage you take. Elemental and chaos resistances, so think fire resistance, cold resistance. These will mean that you take less cold or fire damage, right? So these are really important concepts. And then there's prevention, which is dodge, block, suppression, and immunity, which means you just don't take the hit at all, right? These are, I think, really, really important to be familiar with, because defenses in Path of Exile 1 are incredibly important. It's so easy to die in the game. And, from everything that, GGG has said about PoE 2, defenses are even more important, especially as you reach the end game, because once you fail, your path is blocked. Everything you've kind of been pushing towards is you've got to start all over on that. So, it's much more important for you to have solid defenses and sturdy defenses in Path of Exile 2. Know that there are diminishing returns. So when you think about things like dodge or armor, there's often the more you have of it, the less you get out of it. So it might be really easy for you to stack up armor and get 50% mitigation to physical. But it once you hit that 60, 70, 80% marker, it takes significantly more armor to reach the next point. And so, just know that the more you invest in something, the less you might get out of it, if things work the same way. Always the caveat. Defensive layers. So this is a term that gets thrown around a lot by Path of Exile players when it comes to building and survival. And that means like don't just do one thing. And it's kind of related to this diminishing returns idea. Like if all you've got is a ton of armor, that's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough to deal with a lot of different situations you're running into. It also means that like, you know, when armor fails you, like an enemy can penetrate that armor, you're screwed, you're dead. It also means that, you know, armor means you're only preventing physical damage, and you got to prevent other things too, right? So generally, when people build their own build in Path of Exile, when they invest in defenses, they are investing in a lot, like several different types of defenses. So somebody might have like a really high life count as a warrior. They might max all their resistances. They might stack some armor, and they might also throw block on top of that. And that would be a solid defense. So don't rely on like one or two. Like you may have to combine things together, especially if you're playing like an archer archetype build. Dodge and suppression historically are the top ones, and people will take like life and resistances with those. But know that like these preventions due to diminishing returns are generally not foolproof. You know, like you're gonna be cruising until like you just get one shot out of nowhere. And so that like to survive better, I mean, you're gonna, you know, maybe grab a little armor or life, but you sacrifice damage, or maybe you just want to play fast, sometimes die, and that's okay too. But ultimately, if you want to survive, you gotta have those defensive layers, like an onion. Be the onion. All right, max resistances in PoE 1 capped at 75 and are probably capped at 75 in PoE 2 as well, and are probably going to be an absolute must in endgame, especially when it comes to fire, cold, and lightning resistances. Now, chaos resistance, kind of an iffy one. We don't know too much about the enemies in Path of Exile 2 enough to be able to define how impactful this is, but I would assume that it's worthwhile, especially as a new player, to invest in capping out your chaos resistance. That one's a little tough though, so just get as much as you can. Offense. I threw the formula in there because I'm an asshole and just want to confuse you, but you can ignore it. This is like super mathy stuff. It gets really, really complicated when people are talking about damage, and it's not really worth talking about. So I think the like main concepts that I want to talk about are hit damage and damage over time. So hit damage scales with flat damage and those multipliers. So like critical strike chance and multiplier would scale hit damage. Damage over time historically does not scale with hit damage in the same way. It also cannot crit. And so what I mean by that is if you're doing an ignite, which is a fire-based damage over time, added fire damage is not going to increase the damage that your damage over time does. So, and also like critical strike chance is not going to, give you better DPS for the ignite itself potentially. That may be incorrect if damage over time can crit, but the tick itself, if damage over time is applied on crits, but know that the damage over time tick itself cannot crit. And that's important to recognize. So, poison dealing, I don't know, just a flat 5 damage per second, garbage damage, but you get the point. It can't crit and do extra damage. It's always going to do 5 damage per second. Okay, damage types matter. There's different damage types in the game: elemental damage, physical damage, chaos damage, and even the different elements work differently. So none of them are superior strictly to one another, but knowing that these are different, you'll want to scale them accordingly through item mods, through your passive tree, and all that. Also important to note, enemies have mitigation too, but penetration exists. So enemies may have a ton of armor. You may want to penetrate armor if you're doing physical damage, right? These are the kinds of things that you want to think about when you're trying to build up your offenses and do a little bit better damage. Okay, here's some frequently asked questions. Number 1, should I look at guides ahead of the launch? No, none of the guides ahead of launch are reliable. A lot of them are based on early iterations of the game that may have changed before launch. And others of them are leaking information illegally, and that ethically is not great. I don't recommend looking at guides ahead of launch. I think it's okay to look at what Grinding Gear Games is putting out there and use that to explore the game a little more and get a better understanding of what you want to do. But like, I don't think there's really a great point in looking at guides ahead of launch. Number two, I do want to say, like, any person who's putting out videos that are like, hey, I know this is the meta build and you're gonna want to do that. Like, don't listen to them. That's BS. That's absolute dog shit. Like, don't even listen to that. Number two, what should I do if I hit a progression wall? Well, I think the first step for you to do is to really identify what the problem is. There's a lot of things that can maybe hold you back, whether that's like something as simple as like, hey, I don't have enough life. Like, maybe I should grab some life on my gear. Like, that could be an easy fix that'll get you through things. Or it could just be more related to your damage. Maybe you're not using a weapon or skill that's kind of like synergizing with your build. I think like there's a lot of different ways you can go about this, but I would just take an analytical viewpoint and say, hey, like what's going wrong here and how can I improve that, quite simply. They talked about how like you can get better items, you can farm them up and then try a boss again later, and I just would do that. It's just like improve your gear and try again. The other thing you can do is ask the community. There's a global chat. You can ask people for help and say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. Like, what am I doing wrong? And maybe somebody will be able to help you at that time. Where should I go for more info? I linked to the PoE2 official site. There's the PoE2 wiki. I don't know if that's the one that everybody's going to use, but that's what I linked for now. And I would say like there's other guide websites out there, but be cautious. I would say Maxroll is a pretty good one for beginners. There's a lot of great content creators on YouTube. And for a beginner, I would 100% recommend you focus on the people who have had live interviews with Jonathan Rogers from the PoE2 team. That's a really great way to vet, because that those people are positive influences on the community, and that they're well-respected individuals with big followings. Not to say that like supporting small creators is bad, but like I think like especially as a new player, it's there's so much like crazy info going on out there, people trying to clickbait you, that like I don't think it's really all that great of a situation for you. So I would stick to those channels for at least a start. In closing, I just want to reiterate that this is just a basic overview. It's not comprehensive. I didn't cover anything at all in the end game, and there's even like a lot of basic stuff that I probably didn't even cover, but I hope that this was helpful for you in your journey as a PoE beginner. Number one most important thing for you to remember is that this is a game, and like games don't matter. So just like have fun, like fuck optimal, fuck the whatever people tell you to do. Like, if you want to do like no damage and like never die, and like that's you're loving that, like just do that. Like I don't care. don't let somebody tell you what to do. But like also don't be intimidated. Like there's always a ton of info out there. There's always like these crazy systems, but there's also this robust community that's here to support you and help you out. And there's a lot of people that I've personally felt are like willing to help. And know that like tons of really great guides will come out later too. So if you feel like, hey, I want more guidance in my gaming experience, like maybe like early access is just not the right time for you, and like maybe you just like give it a month and then like try again, and there'll be lots of info out for you to like learn from. The next point is that like this is a new game. Like this game hasn't even launched yet, so there's tons of things that we don't know yet. All of us, like there's like probably not a single person in the community of fans that like understands this all. So like we'll figure it all out together. we'll see. If you're still confused about anything, let me know. I might do a follow-up video. If you are a veteran that for some reason is insanely watching my video for no good reason, like just tell me if I missed anything that you think a new player should know. But yeah, I hope this helped, and good luck, and stay sane, Exile.